Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you. Of
Thanks, Marlene, for accepting my request and accepting to talk with me.
course, it's good to be here.
I saw your profile. I thought to introduce you to my audience. Yeah.
Um,
Can you please introduce yourself to my audience?
of course, of course. Uh, well, my name's Marlene DeVose. Um, and I guess to start off, I would say that I am from Philadelphia, USA. And I am an author as well as a therapist. I've been doing therapy for about 4 years, 4 to 5 years. And I've been writing throughout my entire life, but professionally within the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And my first novel, Poinsettia, was actually published June of last year. So, between those two, a therapist as well as an author, that makes up the bulk of who I am. I'm also a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, where I received my education and pursued dual diagnosis treatment, both mental health and substance abuse, um, which I work in right now in North Philadelphia. So that's me in a nutshell.
What was your subject in your graduation?
I'm sorry.
What was your subject in your graduation? Self abuse.
Yeah, so it was specifically mental health counseling. It's
Okay.
mental health counseling, yeah, 2 year program. And after that, I received my master's and went to started working in therapy with solely mental health in underrepresented communities in Philadelphia. And about 2 years after that, I started doing primarily substance abuse, which I'm currently doing now. So specifically, it was mental health counseling.
Okay. So, what made you to select this subject and do graduation in this subject?
Um, well, I actually got I earned my bachelor's degree in kinesiology, which is exercise science, at Temple University, and Um, I went on to pursue graduate studies in kinesiology. And what I did was I felt at Westminster University. So I felt myself pretty intrigued by the psychology courses. Um, the general psychology courses. I think specifically it was a social psychology. And I found myself very intrigued, a little bit more so than my actual kinesiology courses. So I started to kind of pick my professor's brain a little bit and was really curious about that. And then so I had some life experiences that kind of led me to not pursue graduate studies at Westchester University. So I did eventually. I dropped out because of those personal issues. Took about a year off to really recover from those personal issues. And then when I reflected back on just how much I loved the psychology course that I did take, um, along with those personal issues that I was having, I started to really get an interest in pursuing graduate studies in mental health, and that was in 2015. So yeah, it started out with that psychology course, just that one psychology course.
So, your personal experience made you to select this subject and you wanted to learn this subject.
Primarily, primarily, yeah. I was interested in um, how you know individuals with similar issues can recover. I was interested in the power of talk therapy, and at that time, uh, after I did drop out of Westchester University to really focus on treatment, um, I started to, have a lot of introspection, and I started to look within to find out, about the depression and anxiety, etc., that I was experiencing. And I just became interested in those particular diagnoses. And um, it was only the program at the University of Pennsylvania that was actually the only graduate program that I applied for. I think I was pretty checked out, and kind of, I had the mindset that if I did get in, that's great. If I didn't, that's fine. I'm just going to try. Again, I was at the very end of recovering from those life experiences. And lo and behold, I did get in. And so, um, that's when I started to pursue studying psychology and how to help, individuals with similar issues.
So when did you become the mental health therapist, and when did you start this job?
So I graduated with my master's in 2017, um, in May 2017. And I believe I started with my first therapy position in September. So a few months later, it was part-time. It was called fee for service therapy. And, it was an eye opener. It was a great environment to kind of get introduced to right after my graduate studies. It was nice to be able to put my studies into application. So after the 2 years, of course, there was a practicum. So I did get some field, work while I was in the program at Penn in 2016. But after graduating in 2017 is when I officially started my maybe about 30 hours a week doing therapy fee for service. And then in 2018 is when I left that position and wanted to take a look at dual diagnosis, substance abuse, and mental health at my current job right now in the rehab, um, full time. So that's when I started. Mhm.
So how much experience that you have?
Um, I I think I would say I had quite a bit. Um, Again, I've been doing therapy for about 3 to 4 years. Um, and I remember when I transitioned from doing just mental health therapy to diving into substance abuse. Uh, my supervisor who was interviewing me, she made this statement. She said, if when you work with the substance abuse population, you can work with any population in the world because it is so intense. There are so many different dynamics involved in that population. Um, and so because I work with that population, I would say that I have quite a bit of experience with different factors associated with addiction. So things like trauma, grief and loss, down to prostitution or sex trafficking. All of those things tend to, lead up to addiction in one's life. So although it's been just a few number of years, I would say that I have had a lot of experience with the all women's unit, but the work that they carry with them is a lot and it's loaded. And so because of that, I would say that it's quite a bit of experience, a lot of experience. Yeah.
So how many clients came to you, and what are the problems that they said, and that you felt like this is something which is abnormal?
Which is abnormal, you say?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, in my practice, I tend to shy away from the word abnormal because it I would like to create a setting in an environment that's very comfortable for them. I tend to not speak in the clinical terminology. I tend to with them because I don't want them um, to be discouraged or to not understand the conversations that we're having. Um, so the primary, again, is inpatient, which means they live there between 30 and 90 days to receive intensive treatment. And so the primary issue, again, is being involved with drug addiction from an early age. So the average starting point is about 12 with alcohol maybe or marijuana, which led up to more narcotics throughout their adolescent years. So the primary issue is addiction that started early on. With that, coupled with that, there's usually at least one experience of trauma. They were abused, which led them to want to cope, right, with a substance, and to and they instead of dealing with it in a healthy way. Um, and most times they did not know what that healthy way could have been. And because they were already introduced to the drugs early on, and they were familiar with what that did for what that, how that made them feel psychologically as well as physically, they prefer that over any other method of coping. So again, the primary issue is addiction that started early in life, usually leading up between late 20s, early 30s. And then in addition to that is some instance of trauma.
Is it possible for a human being to have a positive mindset all the time?
Um, that's a really good question. I believe that it is possible to have a positive mindset all the time, in addition to moments of maybe pessimism or negative thinking. I believe that a person can kind of train their thought process. I believe a person, once they learn how to really shape their thoughts, that they can kind of have this like a positive framework. Like in general, they look at life in a positive way. But because all humans, we do experience emotions and we experience events that tend to leave us in a negative state. But again, once a person learns how to reframe that negative thought, I believe that while those thoughts will arise, those negative thoughts, that if generally they would like to live a fulfilled life and in a happy and joyous life, that they learn how to shape that negative thought into a positive one. So again, I would say yes, with moments of negative thoughts too. Yeah.
When a human being is experiencing this negative mindset or mind state, is that possible for him to come out from that mindset and reframe and reconstruct himself or herself and come out from that mood? I know a lot of people are unable to, they can't. I know a lot of people who are unable to come from that all those thoughts will be revolving, all the destructive thoughts, all the thoughts which made them insult, feel uh, abusive. So all this societal abuse or loss of identity, loss of money, or loss of relationship because of all these things. They develop the negative mindset, and coming out from that particular state is that possible for them to reconstruct what they should do?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think that's the whole, no matter what um subfield of psychology or mental health, or no matter what particular framework that a therapist or a counselor utilizes, I think the common goal in all talk therapy is to reconstruct someone's thought processes that led them to the unhealthy place that they are in. And specifically the work that I do is it's very much focused on reconstructing. I think I heard you say their distortions. So their distortions, their cognitive beliefs. There's a particular uh, school of thought called cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's essentially what that approach looks at, taking a person's mindset and teaching them. So of course the therapist, we cannot, do it for them. We can just show them, teach them, and pull it out of them sometimes, even for the more more difficult communicator. So in our clientele, um it's about reframing, kind of seeing the glass half full, half empty, and recognizing that it is half full and it is half empty, right? So not being too optimistic and being realistic, but also being able to completely reconstruct the mindset. So that is possible. It's the whole goal of therapy for most therapies, and especially with the clientele that I work with. Throughout their addiction, they did tend to create these false beliefs, these false ways of thinking that really limits them. And so it's my job to be able to teach them and to show them that um, yes, this is what it felt like in the past several years, but what is actually true, right? Whether you believe it or not, what is the actual truth about yourself? So to answer your question, yes, it is completely possible, and it is the ultimate goal of therapy is to help um, reframe and to reconstruct a person's mindset.
Is there any client of yours who is coming out of his negative mindset even after giving a particular therapy?
Do I currently have a client who, after treatment, they are coming out of their negative mindset?
Even after giving medicine, your medicine, uh, they are there any clients who are still unable to come from a particular mindset?
Sure, definitely, definitely. And so I hear you mention medication, and so what we do at the women's rehab and how rehabs are structured, they tend to be multi-focused. So we look at the medicinal area, right? So we have a psychiatrist on board, so that she may prescribe medications to help with the symptoms of what they're experiencing. So yes, they are dealing with cravings, addiction, maybe even a little bit of withdrawal. Um, in addition to some other mental health issues, some depression, some intense anxiety, some symptoms of PTSD. And so while the psychiatrist kind of helps stabilize those symptoms, we therapists, we then like to do what you were mentioning, help them kind of create their new way of living, right? Because if they are, let's say, 35, started using at age 15, for 20 years of their life, they knew one lifestyle. And so when they come to us, they expect us to help them um, learn a new lifestyle. And so what then we do is try to introduce that to them. And we like to look at a model that kind of measures their readiness to change. And this is ultimately change in terms of giving up everything that's associated with addiction. So not just the very act of using, but everything associated with addiction, that behavior. And some people just are not ready. So some people, they don't have the level of readiness that it takes to actually make that change. And so unfortunately, people do leave after 30, 60, or 90 days and relapse shortly thereafter. Um, and not say that they were not completely ready, but the tools that they learned, they didn't implement, they didn't practice, and and something got in the way that was a little stronger than their current ability to withstand the craving or the urge to use and to relapse. Yeah.
So, what are the mental disorders?
So the primary mental health diagnoses that I work with and that are common in this particular population. So, of course, there is substance abuse disorder and the various kinds, depending on the actual substance. I would say that right now, the primary substance use disorder is opiate use disorder, followed by alcohol use disorder. Tobacco use disorder would be third. And then, of course, there is the dual diagnosis of other mental health disorders. The primary one is bipolar 1, um, maybe secondary PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I would say those two primarily, if not PTSD, then some form of an anxiety disorder. But in the 3 to 4 years that I have been practicing therapy, I've also saw diagnoses such as OCD, such as adjustment disorder, such as different behavioral and conduct disorders. But the primary ones that I work with, again, substance use disorder, major depressive disorder, or bipolar 1 disorder, PTSD, or some other generalized anxiety disorder.
So, in your experience, is there any person or a client that you have seen that you cannot control him by giving your therapy?
Yeah. So it's, a lot of times, if we have that particular kind of client that you're speaking about, they have a level of resistance, and not sometimes not intentional. They're not resisting the treatment, but their actions and their behaviors kind of go against and resist what we're trying to teach them at the rehab, at the clinic. Um, and it's not so much a matter of controlling them, it's more of teaching them how to control their maybe their outbursts or their reactions to stimulus. They're difficult cases sometimes. They're difficult cases. Um, but they tend to be the individuals who either one are not altogether ready to really change. And sometimes they do leave treatment, prematurely. But then also, unfortunately, we have individuals who come in who have been assessed improperly, and their mental health needs are much higher than the treatment that we offer. And so maybe they enter into psychosis. And so at the rehab, again, it's about working collaboratively with the client. And so if they have a higher mental health um, condition, we'll need to transfer them over to maybe a psychiatric unit to get stabilized first, right? Because if they are experiencing psychoses, or some maybe intense PTSD that's kind of having this, kind of dissociated from what is occurring on the rehab, we'll have to have them stabilized first and then come back so that they are aware of the treatment that they are receiving. So difficult to kind of help that particular client with a higher mental health diagnosis, or even someone who's just not ready just yet.
So, you are saying that you will be putting mud on the water if mud is called as the how to think. You will not say how not to think, but you will tell how to think.
Um, I think it could be It could be a combination of both. Um, in the rehab, um, it's it's about kind of help them get towards recovery. So it is a little bit more solution focused. And so at times I do find myself teaching them how to change their thoughts, or even telling them different ways on how to perceive situations, as opposed to an outpatient setting where they're working with a therapist long term and they have time to develop insight. They have time to really learn to do this on their own, so to say, so to speak, um, because they have a longer period of time. They have years and years with an outpatient therapist. But if the rehab is short-term treatment most times, and so a lot of times I am teaching them um, how to change the thoughts about or their self-blame or their guilt or how they perceive their grief and loss in a way that negatively impacts them. Somehow it is their fault. So it usually is brief treatment. Sometimes I do find myself, if I find that their insight is low, I do find myself just teaching them and telling them, okay, here's another way of thinking, and here's another way that you cannot think that way, in this particular unhealthy way. So yeah, so sometimes I do, I teach them both. Mm-hmm.
So, what is the difference between a philosopher, psychologist, and a mental health therapist?
I think so. So it sounds like you said philosopher,
Psychologist.
psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist. Yeah. So all of those disciplines. So I guess I'll start with a therapist. I'm a master's level clinician therapist. Um, and so what we do, we provide talk therapy using any approach that we find ourselves to be well learned. And one could go as far as achieving their or obtaining their license, but then there are others who are solely master's level clinicians. And so we'll do the talk therapy. Um, and if you're in the substance use, working with that population, there could be some case management involved, assisting them with housing, temporary housing, and other, social economic resources. So that's a therapist, and it's much like counseling, right? We're counseling them, we're providing them guidance and support. Now, the psychologist is one who has a doctorate. They're at the doctorate level. They have achieved further education, further licensing. And what they do is they treat much like the master's level clinician, but they also diagnose. They diagnose with and then provide assessment and evaluations. They diagnose with the mental health disorders. The psychiatrist can also perform therapy. The psychiatrists often, especially in this kind of inpatient setting, they are the ones who primarily provide the diagnosis. But then the third layer is that they are the ones who prescribe the psychotropic medications, and they are the only ones who prescribe the medications. So that's what the difference between a therapist, psychologist, and a psychiatrist. Philosopher, although that is very much related to psychology, the philosopher is, again, I believe it can be a master's level or a doctorate level. So the philosopher is a one who research and study one's existence, one's how they function in life, while psychology kind of dives into the mind of the human primarily. Philosophy is more of the life of the human in general.
Do educated and illiterates need mental health therapists?
I'm sorry, did you say, can you repeat
E-
yourself?
Do educated who is highly educated and who is completely not educated, who is illiterate, need mental health therapist in order to set their mind?
I think what you're asking is even a highly educated person, do they often need therapists as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, yeah.
Sure, sure. Excuse me. Sure. And I would like to even disclose that um, I'm a therapist who also sees a therapist, and I have been seeing, and this particular therapist, she's a psychologist, and so I've been working with her, or she's been treating me with talk therapy for about 5 years, and so um, it's a service that is, I think, not used enough, right? So I like sometimes to use the comparison with, although our primary care doctors, our medical doctors, they are the professionals. Um, However, they even need physicals once a year themselves. They even need, to see the dentist every 6 months. Maybe even they need to, meet with a psychologist or a therapist. And so it doesn't always have to be um, the idea that a person is mentally ill in order to see the therapist. It's just that the therapist has a different perspective and has studied the mind, different types of mindsets. And although the highly educated therapists can be, very much um, well learned in their discipline, they also could be having personal issues that they need assistance with from a professional who has a different perspective. And so that therapist doesn't necessarily have to be, have clinical depression or some other mental health disorder. It could just be that they need that extra support from a professional. So I mean, it is, suggested that therapists do have that experience seeing a therapist, to make sure that they are completely well, not just for themselves, but also for their clients.
So you mentioned mental illness. Is that a disease, or if a person is who is experiencing the mental illness is anarchic or rebel, or who is going against to the people, or who is going against to the majority, or who is called as mental ill person?
So mental illness is not there is a lot, it's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of the mental illness. And so when I say mental illness, um I what I mean is that part, a diagnosis that disturbs a person's daily functioning. So if someone is experiencing anything, no matter what it is, if they're experiencing anything and it's interrupting how they function, it's interrupting their work day, their school days, how they interact with people in their relationships, it's considered an illness. Um, Not saying that, like, for example, if you or a friend of yours started seeing a therapist, the therapist doesn't say, okay, you have a mental illness. It doesn't have to, that's not always the case. Um, the mental illness is more so that we know how to classify. We know how to classify what the person is experiencing and kind of understanding a little bit more from, this point of view. And so oftentimes, especially, in the clinic that I'm working in, our focus um, is really teaching the client how to change their cognitive processes and their behavior and their patterns in life, um, and to educate them on what their diagnosis could be and what their diagnosis is as prescribed or, as determined by the psychiatrist in this particular clinic. So it doesn't need to mean that they are disabled, right? So that to say that one has an illness, it typically means that they are a little bit lower functioning. A diagnosis, that just means that there is a criteria. There's a criteria that this person meets, and based on this criteria, they could be experiencing X, Y, and or Z. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so yeah, the mental illness is if their life is really disturbed by that, then their mental health status is low, right? And so maybe they need medication. Whereas a person who simply just has a mental health diagnosis, that just means they're experiencing this, this, and this. And because of that, it seems that they might have depression or this, and they might not need medication. Maybe they just need to talk it out with a therapist.
So, do you know any person who is extraordinary in their profession and who is versed in managing the connections, the relations, the personal life?
Um, sure. Yeah, I would. And so, of course, I would say that the majority of the professors that I studied under at the University of Pennsylvania also had clinical practices. So not only were they professors, they were doctorate level clinicians. And one thing about this particular field is that we try not to disclose so much about our personal lives because we want to learn so much about our clients' personal lives, right? So when we're working with them for an hour, we would like to not talk about ourselves and learn about them instead. And so it's really hard to tell how balanced a clinician is unless they disclose that. So, for example, I would say with my psychologist, I can assume that she has a well-balanced life, but because she is the professional that she is, I may never know how balanced her personal life is. She's so that's just one example, but I would say, like, in terms of former professors, again, because they are in the professional field, they're not going to disclose so much about their personal lives. But I do know that they are delivering, their work well. And, I think when a person has, there's an imbalance in their personal lives, that sometimes it can flow over in their professional lives too. And sometimes it is hard to kind of mask it or work through it. But as far as I know, the clinicians at that level seem to be well, emotionally. But again, that's based off of just our interactions.
So, what works to be mentally healthy?
So that's a very good question. Because although it could sound pretty simple to understand, but not all the time. So I really like to talk about this and educate this with something called Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs. And what that does is it kind of looks at the human, right, regardless of a person's mental health status. So it looks at the human and several basic needs that each human needs to fulfill in order to be well, right? And then, of course, it starts from the very basic all the way up to the higher order and more complex needs. So I believe that when a person is mentally well, psychologically well, emotionally well, they have met the most basic need, things like shelter, clothes, and food, all the way up to safety. And then You have things like love and belonging, right? Relationships, healthy relationships, or relationships that are growing or in developing. And then esteem, how to look at themselves in a positive way, right? Like we talked about in the very beginning, all the way up to self-actualization. So to be well, a person is trying to balance all five of those types of needs. Not saying that they have to be perfect in all of those, because again, we're just human, so we're limited. And but the best we can do is try to achieve all five of those kinds of needs. And I think once a person does have those things in no particular order, but they're working on those things, that's what I think is wellness. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you didn't understood about human mental health after doing
So,
masters?
oh,
Uh,
so much, so much. Oh my goodness. Our minds are so complex. Um, they're so complex, so complex. But and that is why I'm pursuing a master's degree for that very question that you asked. Is there anything that I've missed that I do not know? And there's just so much that I don't know. And I kind of like it that way because it's going to provide me an opportunity to continue to learn about uh, the population that I work with. I will say this: after my master's degree, I feel like I was equipped to work with the population that I'm working with at this level. Um, I don't think there was anything, they didn't teach me anything short of what I need um, with where I am right now. I do hope to dive in a little bit more in the precipitating factors in this population. And so I do hope to uh, continue, hopefully starting this year with a doctorate level, to kind of be able to understand the many moving parts in this population. But yes, the program prepared me very, very well for the dual diagnosis population. Mm-hmm.
is there any person in the world whom you want to study? I mean, whose mental health that you want to study in the world?
A person, like a particular person, their mental health, like I want to kind of learn how their mental processes are. Um, no particular person, no particular person, but I would say though that there's a particular kind of uh, cluster of disorders called personality disorders. There's several clusters under that personality disorder. So you are probably familiar with things like narcissism, which is a personality disorder. Things like borderline personality disorder, histrionic. So that particular kind of disorder, I think, is pretty complex, to say the least. I would be more interested to learn about it. Um, it does show up in the work that I do, right? The people who are diagnosed with substance use disorder do tend to have borderline personality disorder sometimes. You know, there's a small percentage. So I would say I would like to study that mind a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more philosophy in that diagnosis also. But in terms of an actual individual, I don't think so. Mm-mm.
Uh, do you study animals' mental health?
Because do I study any particular mental health, particular person's mental health?
No. Do you study animals, any animals, birds, or any other creature mental health?
No, I have not.
Have you tried?
No. Have I tried? No. But I think it would be an interesting conversation with a person. who has that experience. But I haven't tried. Mm-mm.
Trees, plants.
I'm not too sure they have mental health.
I don't know. I'm asking you.
I haven't studied that particular discipline. Um, but I would venture to say that things like, in terms of nature, do not have uh, minds. In terms of animals, perhaps, but this is not based on any, you know, educational knowledge that I have. It's just an assumption that I would assume that things of nature do not have mental health, maybe spirituality, perhaps. And then in terms of animals, I don't know. It's hard to tell.
So there will be a lot of people who will be watching this video from anywhere on this planet. Do you have anything to say to the person who is watching this video in their mobile phone or in their laptop right now?
Sure, sure. Um, well, first of all, I think um, for you who are watching, you made a huge step in actually watching and listening in on a pretty difficult topic. And although I think, and it's nice that both of our two different countries are colliding to have this conversation, um, which builds a bigger audience. So my message to the audiences would be that no one is meant to navigate through this life alone. That's just not how human beings were created um, to function. And so the lifespan is not meant to be experienced alone. And so why do I say that? Sometimes it is okay to reach out to someone who is professional or more professional, right? So I say that because maybe it is difficult because therapy means different things for different cultures. That's completely understood. So if therapy is not the right step for a person, building support is the right step for all cultures. For all cultures, reaching out to at least one other person who can support you, right? So if therapy isn't the answer or it's not feasible because of the culture or personal preference, um, we as humans, we are meant to to go through this life with some kind of help, right? So if we can't build a complete village to bring us through or to walk with us throughout this life, um, my suggestion would be to reach out to one person that you can fully trust, so that if there's a difficult time or an experience that you would need to process, that you can depend on that one person and continue, and be open and talk about it. And that would be the message. That would be the message that I would give to your audience.
Is there any particular aspect that works to be healthy mentally that you
Um,
believe?
yeah, yeah. I think with being healthy is kind of looking at how asking yourself, how do I feel balanced? So if we take Jane Doe, for example, right? I think if Jane Doe is homeless, right? But she does have a really good friend. She does have food, right? She does have access to food. Um, she feels love and belongingness from her friend. She's doing well in some areas, right? Relationships, getting food, um, having that kind of support in a friend. Maybe her outlook on life is positive. So those are great things. However, there's a missing piece. She doesn't have shelter. She's homeless. So there's something missing. There's something lacking. I think Jane Doe can um, enhance her mental health and her well-being if she then secured shelter. She'll feel better. She'll be warm. Um, you know, that's just like an example. So it is my philosophy, and it's my strong belief that a person needs to feel balanced. And when I say balanced, I don't mean compared to any um optimal balance. More balanced than yesterday. I think a person needs to feel more balanced each and every day. Um, are they doing well spiritually, right? If a person practices spirituality, are they doing things that they enjoy? Are they reading? Are they playing music? Whatever it is that kind of, gives them that excitement. Do they have healthy relationships? Do they feel like they've received enough education? And then maybe there's a person who is doing really well in terms of their career, but when they come home, they don't have anyone to come home to. They don't have many friends. They don't have close relationships. They don't have love. And so it's a little imbalance. And so I believe that when we feel like we can work on all those things to kind of feel balanced or more balanced, that right there is wellness. So it's not 100%, it's getting close to 100% balance and well-being.
So at last, have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
I have.
So
Yes, I have.
what do you say about my mental health?
Well, my diagnosis is this. No, I'm kidding. Um, that's hard to say, and I do hate to give that answer so much, but it is because I haven't met you, I haven't talked to you, and explored your life. I can't because you're on your videos, you're asking questions, you're having great conversations. I will say that it seems I can say so when I say about your mental health, of course I can't treat you based off of the videos that I watched, that I saw, but I have an idea of what maybe your personality is like, which is a part of mental health. Your personality, the characteristics that you uphold. And I will say this, the first thing when I started watching your videos is that you have a lot of energy. You have so many great videos, so many connections. So you have energy. When you reached out to me and we communicated since then, ambitious. And I was talking to someone who I identify as a support. And I was telling her how excited I was about this interview. And I said, this guy is going to go far. And I'm like, this is going to be huge. He has so many great individuals that you interviewed, and the energy is there. And I can project that you're going to do well. So, in terms of your mental health, that's what I can gather from your videos, is that you do have a lot of energy, ambition, and you have a vision. Definitely, I can see that. Yeah.
So at last, any good message? You already gave message. Any message in 1 minute that you want to tell?
Sure, sure. Um, yeah, I would say between trying to find balance in your life, um, and also finding what you are passionate about. And so what I mean by that is it doesn't always necessarily mean has to be a career or a place of employment. Um, if writing poetry is what you are passionate about, do it do it as long as the passion is there, right? It just like each individual on earth needs another individual in their support system, I think a person needs a reason to want to continue to live, right? That thing in the morning that they absolutely do not mind doing. Um, um, I urge each individual to try to find what that is. I do believe that every person does have that. Um, and it's a matter of introspection and trying to figure it out. But and then once you do find it, hold on to it. It can be a lifesaver. I know for me, it was a lifesaver finding that passion. And that would be my message. Yeah.
If you want to save any human beings' lives, or if any human being are facing any mental issue, how do they can connect with you? How can they contact you?
Sure, sure. I'm very accessible. I'm very accessible. Although I'm not be able to treat them, I can definitely lead them in the right direction, and I can even talk to them, mentor them, and I'll be more than happy to be a part of the support system. So they can reach me on social media, of course. So my Instagram at Marlene DeVose, on Facebook, my author Facebook page. Facebook.com / Marlene S as in Sam DeVos. Um, they can also email me at info@marlenedevos.com. I do have a work for in terms of my the work that I do in terms of my books. I do have a phone number which I can provide um, if they wanted to get in touch, but I think what's preferred is email or social media. Mhm. I also have a website, MarleneDeVose.com. If they wanted to contact, they just fill that out and we can start a dialogue there.
So, if you give me your links that from through which people can contact you or can book a session with you, they will contact you. I'll put the links in the description of this video so that people will know on YouTube.
Great. That'd be great.
Yeah. So, so thank you. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel, on the internet, on social media, on my podcast, everywhere with your permission?
Yes, of course. Of course.
I can't hear your voice.
Oh, yes, of course. That's perfectly fine. I will use that.
I lost your voice. I can't hear you.
Is it better? Can you hear me now?
No, no. Let me mute.
Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay. Yeah, you have permission to definitely um put all my information and to also use it in any platform that you would like. That's totally fine with me.
Thank you, Marlene, for giving me your valuable time and giving answers to a lot of questions and telling some valuable information and telling something that works for most of the people.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'll meet you soon again.
Okay. Until
Yeah,
next time.
yeah. Thank you again.
Bye bye.
Bye.